So, before we get started, well, and here's, in case you want to see it in person or on screen, we've got our lovely design cover here. So we wanted to just take a second today. I know a lot of folks in sessions like these breeze over the learning objectives, but this actually helps frame out our presentation. So just wanted to run through those quickly. Today we hope that you'll get out of this session the ability to identify triple bottom line benefits of green stormwater infrastructure, to communicate the benefits of green stormwater infrastructure to various audiences, and this is really key, including developers, designers, and decision makers, to use case study examples to identify challenges in design, construction, and maintenance phases of GSI projects, and to learn about the process of creating a communications and outreach tool for multiple audiences and the challenges around information gathering. So you'll see from these learning objectives, we kind of have two separate aims. One of them will really be to get into the content, and again, to discuss the benefits of green stormwater infrastructure on that content side. And then the other side will be around the development of the library itself, and some of the project management components and some of the structure that we put forth to create this library that we thought was also another interesting take on this library as a tool. So I will be talking mostly about the project management side and kind of how we structured all of the different tactics that culminated in the compilation of the GSI Precedent Library that we're talking about today. So this all started with GSI Partners, which is a subset of the Sustainable Business Network of Philadelphia. The contact there who couldn't be with us today is Anna Ship. She's a project manager for GSI Partners and the interim executive director of SBN. So GSI Partners had this idea to demonstrate that green stormwater infrastructure performs better than gray, both centralized and decentralized, to the development community, the design community, and the regulatory community. So part of their grant proposal was to achieve this goal through a series of tactics. So that is through the creation of a stormwater committee, through the presentation of a symposia series, and in the culmination of all of this, the GSI Precedent Library. So that's where DVGVC comes in. We were the project manager on all of these tactical pieces. So we coordinated and convened the committee. We put on this program series, and then we're one of the co-project managers on the Precedent Library. So starting with the Stormwater Committee, this was a group that we pulled together of industry professionals, of members of the design community, engineers, advocacy groups, and academics to come together to really flesh out what we have in the needs section here. So we want to get to this goal. These are generally the tactics we're going to use, but what do we really need to define in order to achieve that goal of reaching these various audiences with this message that green is better than gray? So through the Stormwater Committee, we really refined these points and these needs that we wanted to address, which is to highlight the degree to which GSI projects perform above their design intent, using the triple bottom line, so economic, social, and environmental benefits, as our lens for how we would demonstrate this. Also to share monitoring data and construction and maintenance costs, because we knew, especially with the development community, folks wanted to see that GSI was performing above intent and also wanted a really clear picture as best as possible of what the costs would be. And we also, through this process, wanted to showcase innovation in the industry. So again, now getting into the process a little bit, that first step was to convene the Stormwater Committee I mentioned that helped us really kind of refine some of those points that we wanted to address through the library and some of our other programming. So with this Stormwater Committee, in addition to refining and defining the goal, we also pulled together an RFP that we put out to assemble a team to help with the development of the library, knowing that this would be our final product in the process. So the team that put together the best proposal, and this is how Chelsea comes into the mix, is composed of folks from Meliora Design, Andrew Pogon Associates, Roof Meadow, Site Green Solutions, and Indigo JLD. So we got this team on board so that through all of these other kind of complementary programming pieces and education that we were doing along the way toward forming this library, we had our team on board already so they could begin the process of information collection and really getting in from the ground floor. So the next piece, again, through the process of developing this library, we wanted to have a series that ran alongside it with some extra education to make sure we were reaching an even wider audience right out of the gates. So we had 2 events that were specific to soil and plant performance. The first being on soil performance at Central Green at the Navy Yard, the second on plant performance at Lee Elementary. So we did kind of an interesting structure for these 2 events, keeping in line with what we wanted to do and mimic in the library on the whole, which was have academic research and data that was supported by case study examples. So we had folks from Drexel University, from other academic institutions kind of give one piece of the puzzle, which was the academic research side, and then we had the other component of each of these events, which was a case study presentation and then a tour of an actual site. So we got both of those components of kind of the academic side and then the practitioner piece to blend those 2 together. And it served yet another purpose, which you'll see with a lot of kind of our tactics and our strategy for this, which was to get out the call for nominations for the Precedent Library. So we had an audience of 50 folks where they went through this half-day session of getting information on academic research, talking about the performance of GSI and this case study presentation. But we also communicated to them that we had this nomination process open for different projects that would ultimately be considered for presentation in our GSI Precedent Library. So we put out this call nationwide, and this was where our project team came in and helped get this out to folks who worked on projects all throughout the country. And what we were looking for was projects that had applicability to Philadelphia, so projects that were in urban areas that had similar base conditions to what we would see in Philadelphia. So we cast the net far and wide through this process. And again, this was kind of the next piece in pulling together our library. So this is what we got. We got a list of 40 different nominations from all over the country. 16 of those came from Philadelphia, so the ones in Philly are highlighted in green. So we got a really good wide range of projects from urban areas all throughout the country. So our next piece of the puzzle there was putting together a rubric that would be fair for each of the projects, and again, get back toward that original goal of demonstrating that green stormwater infrastructure in many cases is performing above its design intent and is performing above even decentralized gray infrastructure. So our library was used to evaluate each of those 40 nominations that we got. So this was a laborious process. And to start, we looped in folks both from the regulatory community and from industry to review this rubric, to make sure it was rigorous, to make sure it was fair, and to ensure that it was getting toward our goal of what we were trying to demonstrate with the projects that we included in the library. So the first lens that we used to look through, up at the top here, we had 5 different category areas. So again, using that triple bottom line frame, we looked at environmental benefits, social benefits, and economic benefits of each of these nominations. And we looked at innovation and monitoring data. So it wasn't enough with monitoring data just to have it, though we realized that that could have been a question in and of itself, is whether or not the project was monitored. But we really wanted projects that were performing above design intent. So we had those 5 category areas, and we ranked each on a high, medium, and low scale. So again, I expect that no one can actually read what's on the screen here. Don't worry, it is an appendix in the library itself, because we wanted to make sure, again, we were very, very clear about what each category and each ranking area meant when evaluating the projects. ultimately, we selected the top 15 projects, and we organized them just by alphabetical order, but in order to have an element that kind of tied them all together and helped with categorization, we had our BMP scheme that we have highlighted for each of the projects. So for the BMPs that they used, they are highlighted for each project in green. So if folks want to use this library just as a reference, and we realized today just in talking through our projects and what the most popular BMP was, all but one project made use of soil storage. So that'll come up later in our content section. But again, if you're looking for a project that uses a specific BMP, we have our little scheme here, so you can just pick and choose through the projects. So before we get deeper into kind of a breakdown of the case studies and what information we have in there and what some of the content takeaways are, and that's what Chelsea will bring today, just wanted to talk about, again, that kind of academic complement that we wanted to make sure was part of this library. So the project team did a very comprehensive literature review of publications and peer-reviewed research to demonstrate the triple bottom line benefits of green stormwater infrastructure. So that included local reports on economic impact of GSI, reports that were, again, double purpose for everything, that were presented at our events that proved to be a really solid base for demonstrating some of these areas. So for the environmental benefits, we focused on, and it's all kind of presented too, I think it's important to talk about the presentation in the literature review section. They're all quick takeaways of just almost little sound bites organized by each of the 3 triple bottom line areas where you can look through by different category areas. So say if you're looking in the environmental benefits section and you want to get some stats on how green stormwater infrastructure reduces runoff and get some really good data to support that, you can go through section by section to pull out some of these little tidbits that you can use to talk about the benefits of GSI. So under the environmental section, we have a category for reduced runoff, air quality, climate change benefits, reducing the urban heat island effect, and improving habitat and biodiversity. Same thing with the social section. We focused on community amenities, recreational benefits, reduction of crime and violence, and employee and student health and productivity. And then for the economic section, we have both direct and indirect economic impacts of GSI projects and focused on job growth and property values. So again, this is a really good way to just go through the library and be able to pull from peer-reviewed academic research some facts that support the benefits of GSI. So I went through most of this already, but I just wanted to take one highlight out of there that was in our economic section, which showed that with the 496 GSI projects that have been completed in Philadelphia under Green City Clean Waters in its first 5 years, those projects, if they were in proximity to a house, increased home values by 10%. So if you actually aggregate that impact, that's $1.3 billion in increase in citywide property value. So these are the types of things that we wanted to pull out as examples of where green stormwater infrastructure is having economic impacts and really showing, again, either in specific cases or in the aggregate, how beneficial GSI is to communities. So I will turn it over to Chelsea now to get deeper into our content section.
So first, thank you for staying late on a Saturday to this is really a labor of love for Katie and I, so I appreciate everybody being here. So I'm just going to walk you through an example of a case study. This is the Kids Zoo U, the Children's Zoo at Philadelphia Zoo. Every case study has 2 spreads. The first spread is kind of what we call a beauty shot, great photo, a summary, and kind of like Katie said, sound bites. We really, no one wants to read a lot of text, and so we really tried to distill all the information down for you. So, there we go. On every sheet, you're going to find these BMP icons. It's really helpful in flipping through the book itself or online, just eye-catching, oh, I want to look at rain gardens, so you're going to look for that icon on every page. So the project summary, the Philadelphia Zoo, the Kids Zoo transformed an old zoo exhibit into a really innovative indoor-outdoor children's zoo. It was constructed in 2013, and it actually won an award in 2014 for, I'm going to read it, Exhibit of the Year Award from the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. This design is really great. It's a design where water isn't just a design feature. There's a lot of different BMPs, but it's also really evident as you walk through it. It's an educational component. It's in signage. You really get to relate how the animals in the zoo need the water and how the plants in the zoo need the water. So it's really well linked. All right, and project impact. This site specifically captures an inch of runoff from all impervious surfaces. It reduces the 2-year, 24-hour volume to less than pre-development conditions. It reduces flooding issues that they had on site, improves water quality through mechanisms such as infiltration, water quality inserts, etc., and also creates habitat. So this is the second spread of every case study. The first category is project statistics. It was really important for us to really report the same thing for every case study. You're going to be able to go through this book and compare the project statistics of the Kids Zoo to the project statistics of Central Wharf, see how the costs compare, the size compares, all that type of thing. So here we have location, Philadelphia. It was constructed in 2013. It's just about 2 acres. Every project statistics, you'll also find the type of development, the prior land use conditions, the client, the project team, and cost information, which wasn't always easy to get. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. Design and performance. So this section really talks about stormwater requirements, if applicable. It's not always applicable. Infiltration, if it's possible, and monitoring, if the site is at all monitored. Yeah, it's cold out, so don't forget that. So the Kids Zoo was required to go through the Philadelphia Water Department's regulations in 2013. It reduced site impervious by 35%, which is over the 20% requirement by the Water Department. So therefore, we were exempt from, full disclosure, my firm worked on this project, so I say we, I mean the design team, was excluded from flood control requirements and channel protection requirements. A really unique challenge to this site is with animal holding yards, we had a lot of runoff. It's very compacted ground. It acts like impervious surfaces. There's elephants and buffalo and et cetera walking on this. And we're not allowed to take that runoff and treat it through a traditional BMP. So we actually had to bring that water to the sewer. So instead of seeking an exemption, the zoo is really proactive and instead ended up managing impervious surfaces that were previously unmanaged. So they essentially swapped the area, which is great. There's no monitoring equipment on this site. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, and infiltration was possible. So the next section in every case study talks about the approach, the design, construction, post-construction, and maintenance of each specific project. So for the Philadelphia Zoo, we have a lot of BMPs. There are green roofs, infiltration beds, rain gardens, level spreaders, and cisterns for toilet flushing and water reuse. Some of the design challenges were, as I said, soil compaction. Another one was that there's a lot of large mature trees on site, so we really wanted to protect those trees where possible. Design around from E&S tree protection fence to demolition and air spading. We really had to consider those throughout. And as if you've worked on any urban project, there's utilities everywhere, and so that was a major design consideration for this site. The Kids Zoo was constructed while the zoo was still open to the public, so making sure construction fencing was safe for both the contractors, the public, the animals. This took a lot of collaboration between the client and construction team to make that possible. And finally, post-construction and maintenance. The site has little maintenance. There was temporary irrigation required to establish vegetation in the beginning, but once it was established, other than weeding and normal kind of garden-like maintenance, there's not too much to do here. There's also water quality inserts that need to be cleaned, but overall, it's a pretty low maintenance site. So the next category is findings, and Katie touched on this a little bit, so I'm not going to go through the same material, but I will talk about some of the zoo-specific triple bottom line benefits. So for environmental benefits, managing stormwater reduces your combined sewer overflows. It promotes groundwater recharge and improves water quality. We reduced heat island effect by planting over 120 trees. And as I said, we preserved as much existing tree canopy as possible. New green spaces with native plantings created habitat, and it was like kind of a reoccurring theme that data is really difficult. Like, people don't want to share it, a lot of people don't collect it, and often anecdotal evidence is overlooked. And so I think what really proved the success of this project is that in 2015, we had migrating monarchs come to visit our milkweed at the site. And so little things like that, we don't have specific data, but I think, anecdotal evidence like that is still very important. Social benefits. Obviously, interaction between children and animals. The educational signage that was provided, and how children can see water moving through the site and have a relationship to water in that way. Economic benefits can be pretty difficult to quantify indirectly. Direct benefits, like if you have a green roof on a site, you can charge more for that office space. It's not really something you're going to see at the Philadelphia Zoo, but there was increased ownership and increased foot traffic in this exhibit. All right, so every case study has takeaways. Really, the underlying goal of the zoo was to mimic hydrology, natural hydrology, and it's difficult. It's often difficult navigating utilities, tree protection, all the items I said before in an urban site. So that was a really major takeaway. It's difficult, but possible, definitely. So I know I just got to walk you through one example of a case study, but these are the overall kind of takeaways from every case study. I wanted to list them, get your thoughts, and see if you've had similar challenges. So the first one is navigating permitting and regulatory requirements. Just like the zoo and the animal holding yards, it's not always straightforward. The zoo had a green roof, and they did water reuse to flush toilets, but it wasn't permitted because the requirements in 2013 weren't very clear as to how you permit a water reuse system. And jump in if you guys have any thoughts on these. Yeah.
I just have a question. You said that impervious area was reduced by 30%. Did you reuse any of the impervious materials in the project design?
I don't think we did on this project. We have in the past on other projects.
Okay. And my other question is so you obviously had to replace that impervious surface with something. Did you use a manufactured soil?
I think it was just planting area. So it went from gray to green, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good questions. So the next takeaway was to apply a system-based approach to design. The Kids Zoo has, I think, 4 rain gardens. And instead of thinking as the 4 rain gardens kind of operating on their own separately, link those rain gardens. You're going to maximize your benefit of all that soil. You're going to kind of mimic natural hydrology more accurately. So really thinking of kind of the cistern, the green roof, everything acting as a system is going to improve your performance. Incorporating GSI into already proposed site features. Say you're doing a sidewalk and you're going to consider porous material. If you add a few inches of clean stone to the subbase, which you're going to need anyways, you're going to be able to manage more volume in a cost-effective way. So really being creative, saying, I'm already doing this, how do I make it GSI? Soil is key. This is a great one. It really came out in our symposium, and it really resonates through a lot of these. As we mentioned, most of the case studies have soil as a major feature, and that could be a whole nother presentation, soil design considerations, something I'm not an expert in, but really soil biology, you're kind of lost without it. I mean, we looked at a project where the plants weren't doing so well, and what's your sand component? Like, how strong is your soil to stand up to things like animals trampling all over it? So really carefully considering and designing what kind of soil you want site-specific. Implementing GSI in urban areas with multiple obstacles is feasible. And this really goes back to the fact that we really looked for GSI projects that were relevant to Philadelphia. So there's 15 great urban examples that had to navigate utilities. I, as a civil engineer, have actually been told that urban GSI is not, cost effective and it's not practical, and I refuse to believe that, and I think everybody else should too. It's definitely practical, it's definitely effective, and these 15 case studies prove that. So, carefully integrating a building and a site. So it's really important to consider, you have water systems in your building, you're going to have water systems on site. Like, how do you link those? How do you interact with them? There's a project in this book, Moorhead Environmental Complex through Stroud. They have a really silly to say, but a beautiful wastewater treatment wetland right out front of their building. And if you walk by it, you would never know, and so it's really a benefit to its visitors, it's really a benefit to them, financially and maintenance for sand mounts and that sort of thing, but really considering the building and the site as one thing. Reducing irrigation demand through use of native plants. Some of these are more obvious than others. I would hope at this point, if you're in the environmental field, you understand the importance of native plantings. If not, please visit the literature review in the back of this book. There's plenty of information for you. Acknowledge the importance of stakeholder engagement and education early. I cannot stress this enough. You're going to find in this book examples of successes in this aspect and a lot of lessons learned. There's the project featured the Washington Canal Park. They did a water reuse system to flush toilets, and they actually had to take it offline because folks didn't like the dirty look of water in the toilet. And so, really getting people engaged up front. There's a system out there that could be functioning really well, and unfortunately it's down right now. So, and finally, collaboration between the design team and contractor. As an engineer, I feel like this is really important, but a lot of field changes happen. At the zoo, there was a potable water line that was feet away from where we thought it would be. It was on the survey here, it ended up being over there. If we weren't involved as engineers, who knows what they would have built. I guess the point is no one really would have known except for the contractors. So really engaging the design and engineering team into construction. All right, so these are just overall challenges and takeaways. And, I think going through this process, these are kind of the questions that we're left with. So, again, I just said this, but our designers and engineers involved post-construction. The next question is, what does GSI cost? A seemingly simple question, very straightforward, and very difficult to find information on. I had a few really stressful weeks trying to convince people to share this information. As an engineering firm, we're not always privy to the cost estimates, and we don't always keep in touch with the client afterwards to follow up on maintenance costs and that type of stuff. So, if you're to nominate a project for this library and you don't know that information, I think that's a really big gap in our field right now. It's like being more collaborative and coming up with these cost, solid data for cost is really important.
When you were bidding the project, did you have multiple contractors bidding on it? Did you require, I mean, a lot of times you'll require the contractor to submit their projected costs.
Yeah.
So that you can compare apples to apples.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you did in this project or if it was a sole,
Yeah.
contractor was chosen. But a lot of times, I think you'll be able to see what the range of costs from different contractors.
Mm-hmm.
And my other question is, did you have criteria in your bidding that required a particular level of experience from the contractors before they were allowed to bid? Because I know that
Yeah.
building BMPs is not something that every contractor can just
Right.
jump in and do.
Yeah. And so I didn't do the construction administration or bid for the Philadelphia Zoo, but in my experience, we, as engineers, we do really push to have a contractor that has experience. I've worked with contractors for one example is the porous asphalt walk, and they kind of over compacted it because they didn't have, and it wasn't as porous as we really needed it to be. And again, that's really involving the designers and engineers in construction. It's so important.
The great example is seeing a track hose sit in the bottom of an infiltration basin.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, one of my favorite was one time I was at a site and they were planting trees and sweeping the dirt onto the porous asphalt parking lot. I almost had a heart attack. I was like, that's...
Or seal coating porous asphalt.
Oh my goodness. So back to the cost. I mean, I know we have costs for things like porous asphalt per square foot. But overall, I really don't know if we have kind of a comprehensive look, or a lot of times people look for like, what does the stormwater component cost?
I just know that I mean, as working for engineers and
Yeah.
architects, that we always generated our expected costs,
Right.
but the real costs come from their bid documents.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that really are going to make money or lose money on it.
Yeah.
So they know what to put. They know what numbers to put in there.
Well, and another point, it kind of gets to my next comment, risk of sharing data or project information. I ran into this situation a lot where folks didn't want to share, which is difficult. Like, what are the risks of sharing the project cost? I mean, I don't know, I'm not a developer, so I don't really notice too many risks, but I understand that everybody has their own barriers, and there's a lot of folks who kind of were hesitant to share some information. So that was also pretty difficult putting this together, trying to ask folks, how much did this overall project cost? The zoo is $3.3 million or something like that. So you'll notice if you flip through the book, there's going to be some unknowns, and that's really where that stems from. Another thing is we reached out to some of our clients, like we reached out to the zoo, and we're like, how much do you spend a year on maintenance? I don't think they know. I don't think they know for this specific site. I think they know for their overall campus. So we really don't know how much money they spend maintaining those 4 rain gardens. We did a porous paver plaza, Perman Plaza, not in the book, but and I was just talking to their maintenance people, and I was like, so how much time do you spend out here maintaining these pavers? Like, I just sweep them. Like, it's in my normal routine. Like, I just sweep. I couldn't tell you hours because it's a part of a larger, and so like, how do we get to hours maintaining a rain garden? And rain gardens and vegetated systems are going to be different than something subsurface because you need to pay closer attention to plants in the first year. Year 3 and 4, they require less maintenance to establish. So that's kind of a curve instead of something that's maybe consistent. It just really hits home back to GSI printers and what Katie said, that we really need this data. It's available, we can do it, but how do we get around to doing it is really the question. And I think the library is a first step in kind of outlining what we need, what we're missing. And then the big question, who has performance data? So Katie and Anna approached us, after we submitted our RFP, and they were like, hey, we want to feature projects that have monitoring data. How many projects do you guys know that have monitoring data? One?
No, I what?
Yeah.
It's part of the URWI stuff.
Oh, okay.
We have to monitor stuff.
Right.
But it's just went in, so
Right, and so there's this new wave of projects that are going for sites. Are you guys familiar with the site certification? It's like LEED, but it's for landscape. It's pretty rigorous. There's only one residential sites person or home in the whole period, one period, and it's required that you monitor, which is great, but it's not really super specific on what you monitor, and there aren't a lot of projects that are there at that point yet. And so we really struggled to find projects that had data. Rainfall, fine, but like outflow from your rain garden. There's Shoemaker Green featured in the library is, I think, one of 2 projects. Out of 15, we have 2 that have data. And even though they have data, it's really difficult to kind of summarize the data in a few numbers. There's some great broad language like, oh, well, in 3 years it hasn't discharged once. But, as an engineer and, my background's water resources, and like, well, how many 100-year storms have we had in those 3 years? How many 25-year storms have we had in those 2 years? How many inches overall is it managing? And we're all working to get that information for that one project. But that's one project over, the 40 plus, 40 nominations that we got, and how many GSI projects are implemented in Philadelphia? It's too many to count at this point. So yeah, that was a really big gaping hole for us, actually. And I know GSI partners in SBN and DPGC are doing a lot to kind of push the envelope, and there's a grant that just kind of wrapped up it's for private projects. I should know this, I helped write it. It's for private projects to monitor their GSI systems for a year. And then the next question is a year enough? Is 3 years more appropriate for something vegetated? Where the library is a great tool, which is the next slide that Katie and I are going to talk about, we're still left with a lot of these questions. Next steps.
So I'll come back up here so you can all also view the fact that Chelsea and I have been working on this project together for so long that we constantly wear the same
This is like
color
the
scheme.
second time
we've presented this, second time we've worn remarkably similar outfits.
Yeah.
So that is what 6 months on a very collaborative project will do.
Yeah.
So again, we really wanted to take a little bit of time too in talking through, not only the structure and kind of the idea behind the library, how we got there, some of the information that we know we still need to work to develop. We wanted to leave you with, so what do you do with this thing? We took all this time, we built all this infrastructure around it, we had all these conversations, had these events, pulled together literature to support the points we were trying to make, have all of these great case studies with all of this really detailed information. So how is this a useful tool? And I think that's what we wanted to make sure we ended on today, just to talk about those different audiences that this library can help reach. So in particular, we wanted this to be a tool for designers and engineers to help to improve the design and performance of BMPs. So again, sharing best practices, lessons learned, and making sure that we share data as best as possible through this vehicle. As a tool for regulators. So one of the goals of this was, again, to really support Green City Clean Water, support GSI as a way to reach goals under the Clean Water Act, and make sure that we are helping the spread and proliferation of GSI as a really viable economic option, a good social and environmental option. So we wanted to use this and have data from monitored projects to help expand performance metrics and calculation methodologies used to approve GSI projects. And I put the 2 little stars on there just based on what Chelsea dug into a little bit, which is as much as we wanted to highlight data in this report and did so to the extent that it was available, we still have to continue to do other things like the private project monitoring grant and keep promoting tracking this data in a way that makes sense and will help the spread of GSI.
And maybe if we have a version 2 of this library in a couple of years, because I don't know if we could handle it again, there might be more projects that have monitoring, and that's really the goal. That's the end goal.
So we knew, we weren't necessarily going to have the, perfect end product that had, 15 fully monitored projects with perfect cost data and all of this information to prove to regulators and developers and just, the general public that GSI is performing above design intent and is the preferred option to gray. So we know this is a work in progress. I think we put together a really great product here. That's a great resource, but we're going to keep working to make sure that there's more data available to, again, make this point perhaps in 2018, not this year. And again, just some of the other audiences that can be reached with this, just the general public to communicate the benefits of GSI, and again, to follow along with really nice project examples that folks can actually go visit. And the same thing for elected officials, but also use this to support the need for legislation to help support and scale future projects. So,
Is this, this is specifically for the Philadelphia region?
so it is with the idea of kind of using this to communicate with regulators and elected officials. It's specific to Philadelphia, but it has applicability elsewhere.
Well, I know that there's like a lot of data from Maryland and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Chesapeake.
Yeah.
Have you talked to the Philadelphia Water Department about possibly having,
Oh, yes.
getting that, because they got a very strong arm to bend people's arm behind their back to participate in data gathering.
Yeah. And then, like, the water department themselves has their own monitoring program. A lot of what they monitor is subsurface, which is maybe not what we were looking for. And again, to the data sharing point, everybody's hesitant to share their data with other people. So, because then you make your own conclusions from it, and I think they want to make the conclusions and tell you, and nothing, I don't mean it as a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's kind of the reality.
There may be some other sources of information too. And I'm just going to say this because I was involved in it. When I was with Kling a number of years ago, we actually got some money. We did a project with a biofiltration basin in Wilmington. And we got the money to do we studied whether or not it was effective. And those results were published in Stormwater Magazine.
Yeah.
And a couple of my, Kevin Selger and was one of the people that were involved. So there may be actually organizations within, say, the Philadelphia engineering community that are proceeding on their own to develop some of this information that, like in that case, that information was public because we got the money to do it and then publish the results. So you may be able to reach out to the engineering and landscape architects and Anthropoga and those kind of people that may actually say, oh yeah, we have some of that. We'd be glad to get. Maybe you have.
Yeah,
And that's what we did.
And you'll find a lot of kind of data percentages, a lot of more metrics in the literature review, where it wasn't maybe site specific and it didn't have the triple bottom line benefits. I mean, it's still an important metric to use in design and that type of thing. So if you're looking for kind of, the soil compaction stuff, like there's some literature excerpts in the literature review section of the library that kind of hit home for that. But for the case studies, it was a little bit, we had more factors than just monitoring. Like monitoring, I think, was one of the 5 categories. So that's kind of where it came from.
So is this a DVGBC product that's available to the engineering community in the Philadelphia area?
I'm going to pull it up for you.
Great question.
So it's available online. You're ahead of me.
Yes, we
Sorry
have
about
this.
that.
No, you're good.
Oh no, that was actually the perfect next step.
It was.
So we have this available online in flipbook form. So again, the idea is to use this as a resource. It touches so many different audiences. We're using this, again, not only to show the data and the evidence that we have now, but use it to advocate for more sharing of information, updated regulations, and more legislation to support GSI in Philadelphia. So we want to get this out far and wide. This is why we've been talking about this to folks, talking about the process, the product, and then making sure you have this available as a resource. So I have a few copies here in person. We did a limited print, obviously in keeping with our trend here of being environmentally friendly, but this is available online at DUGBC's website. So it's available to click through, and again, it reads like a book, so you can flip through all of the case studies, go in the back to the literature review, and if you want to really know what was on that tiny, tiny rubric print, you can read it all in there as well. So, and if anybody wants a hard copy, as I said, we have a limited number of those here as well for folks.
I know the pictures are great, right? I always say it's like a coffee table book that's like really useful because, you know, if I, as an engineer, if I'm like, oh, are you sure you want to do, we could do a stormwater wetland, and, you know, here's a really beautiful example of what that can look like.
You have
Yeah.
some of your projects are amazing. You have any?
Yeah, some of our,
Okay,
some of my firms.
Some of yours are, well, the zoo one.
Yeah, the zoo is a Meliora project, yeah.
Well, and that was part of kind of the process as well in working with our graphic designers, that we wanted this to be data focused. We wanted this to be, you know, we wanted to have as much information as possible. We knew we were going to have some anecdotal evidence, but wanted to, you know, as much as possible hammer home the finer points that we thought were very important. So she convinced us to do a 4-page spread, so the whole thing wasn't text. She's like, we're going to need a couple more pictures here.
Well, and it's great. There's so many different scales. So is Phoenix Park is a great community park in Camden. It's in a super industrial area, really disadvantaged. And so they turned, you know, they have access to water. They have these beautiful porous paths. It was like a really great community effort, community plantings, etc. I think I'm trying to figure out 5.5 acres almost in Camden, New Jersey of green space, which is fantastic. And, you know, and then you have the multi-million-dollar Shoemaker Green. So it's a really, you know, you've got both sides here. You know, you've got small projects, big projects, expensive projects, high profile, and then maybe not so much. So.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, thank you all for your time today. We hope you find this to be a valuable resource.